Welcome back to Midnight Outcry. Tonight we bring you one chilling testimony, an intimate, true account from deep within the Appalachian Mountains. This isn't folklore. It's raw, unfiltered, and terrifying. What happened in those woods left a scar on the storyteller, and it might leave one on you too. If you're drawn to real horror that lingers long after the screen fades, subscribe to Midnight Outcry. Now, listen closely. The mountains remember. I'm David, and I was once a mountain climber. It was. Given what transpired on Grandfather Mountain, I can't look at peaks in the springtime without hearing my name mumbled in the wind. For 23 years, I have been climbing since I was 16 years old. Began with North Carolina's native rock faces before moving on to challenging ascents in the Appalachian region and beyond. I've reached the top of mountains in Colorado, Montana, and even made 2 attempts at Denali. However, my first passion has always been the Appalachian Mountains. Those old, faded peaks that appeal to something deep within me and conceal secrets in their shadows. I have always had a spiritual bond with these mountains. I used to hear my Cherokee grandmothers say tales about the spirits that resided in the upper echelons, and how they occasionally selected particular individuals to join them in the everlasting dance between the sky and the earth. Those stories were never taken by me, literally, but I could relate to the emotion she was expressing. While I'm climbing, when confronted with obstacles like stone, gravity, and my own limitations, I have a sense of belonging to something greater than myself. It was meant to be a normal climb that would change everything. Technically speaking, Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina is not difficult. It's not so much a climb as a hard hike. However, the majority of visitors never see this part of the North Face. Narrow ledges and a stretch of exposed rock that needs technological know-how to securely navigate. I had probably traveled this trip 50 times. Occasionally over the years, generally when I wanted to decompress or rekindle my passion for climbing. Location. On a Thursday morning in early May, I set out by myself. The forecast was accurate. Light winds, pleasant temperatures, and clear skies. I intend to descend the North Face's technical way after ascending the tourist trail, something I had done numerous times previously. Few people ever get to enjoy the breathtaking vistas of the valley that this lovely descent offers. The journey to the summit was not noteworthy. On the main trail, I passed a few other hikers, struck up a conversation, and arrived at the peak at midday. I located a peaceful area because the observation deck was crowded with families and amateur photographers. To have lunch and get my equipment ready for the descent, away from the crowds. I first heard it at that time. My name was shouted as loudly as Dave from somewhere outside the tourist area. David. Regions. Said in a typical conversational volume, not yelled. However, despite the wind and other guests' conversation, I managed to hear it clearly. I glanced about, reflecting. I didn't identify anyone, but perhaps someone I knew had noticed me. The voice appeared to fall from the North Face, which is the way I had planned. Come on over, David. It was there. I heard a woman's voice once again, soft and recognizable, but I couldn't identify it. It sounded like my grandmother's voice, but she had passed away 15 years prior. I walked up to the North Face's edge and peered down. It was easy to see the technical path I had intended, ledges and rappel places that I have utilized numerous times. However, there currently appeared to be an extra route, a slender path that followed a ridgeline that I had never seen previously. It appeared difficult but doable, and it appeared to lead to a part of the mountain I had never been to before. The voice returned, more determined. In this manner, David, I've been anticipating my superior judgment, and ever since I've regretted this every day. I started to follow the voice rather than my intended path. After setting up my rappel equipment, I began to descend the North Face. However, I took the new ridgeline rather than my normal route. My feet felt firm on the rock, and the path, although I couldn't recall seeing it on any topographical maps, it appeared to have been well traveled. With every stride, the voice became into more distinct and clear. Yes, exactly. Continue to arrive. You're nearly here. My logical side was shouting warnings. I didn't intend to take this way. I was straying from a climb that I was familiar with by heart to listen to a voice that ought not to be heard. However, the sound had a captivating quality, something it was impossible to go back because of that. It was like returning home. The new route led to me along a slender ridge I had never seen previously, providing a very different perspective of the valley than anything that had happened to me on this mountain. Below, the scenery appeared more untamed and savage, as though I were observing the region as it was centuries ago. No buildings, no roads, a forest that goes on forever to the horizon. "Look at me, David." I checked and caught sight of her. 100 yards ahead, on a steep cliff, stood an elderly. A woman of Native American descent, dressed traditionally. Her lengthy gray hair, her eyes seemed to contain depths that dated back generations, and she moved in a wind that I was unable to sense. In the old photos, she resembled my grandma completely, but she seemed timeless. "Grandmother!" I exclaimed, even though I knew it couldn't be done. With a smile, she gestured for me to keep climbing in her direction. "You have maintained me. It's time to return home, grandson. I've been waiting so long." Every instinct I'd formed was asking me to halt, go back, and go down after more than 20 years of climbing. Get off this mountain now. However, her voice was so friendly and inviting, and something more powerful than reason or survival instinct pulled me ahead. I ascended in her direction. My equipment started experiencing odd issues. My GPS device began to display coordinates that aren't possible. The equipment indicated that I was ascending a mountain that was 3,000 feet higher than grandfather's actual elevation of the mountain. My compass whirled wildly, failing to locate any magnetic north. Every breath appeared to be harder, as the air itself seemed to get thicker. Yet I persisted in climbing, even though I knew she couldn't be. The woman, my grandmother, kept on to motivate me to keep going. "David, just a bit farther. You're nearly there. You're nearly at home." She was standing on a rocky outcrop that appeared to retreat, always remaining just out of grasp as I came closer. However, hours went by. My watch had malfunctioned. There was no movement of the sun in the sky. Time itself seems to be suspended. I became aware that I was no longer on Grandfather Mountain at that point. Impossibly high above me, the peak I was climbing vanished into clouds that weren't there before I got begun. Below, the forest appeared older, more untamed, and teeming with trees from a time before people lived there. Additionally, other climbers were dispersed around the mountainside. There were many of them, all moving slowly upward with the same resolute. I could sense the sleepy look on my own face. "Greetings from the actual mountain," my grandmother said. Her voice was suddenly emanating from within my mind. The one that lies between the living world and the forefathers' world. "David, you've been called home. This last rise was always preceded by climbing." I took a closer look at the other climbers and became further alarmed upon discovering that they were all donning antiquated equipment, which was from the 1970s, 1980s, and even before. A few donned climbing equipment that I had only seen in old photos. They never stopped moving with mechanical accuracy. Their expressions were lifeless and calm, never turning around. "What is the duration of their stay? Climbing?" I inquired. "Time doesn't matter here," she said. They scaled the endless mountain, seeking a peak that only those who genuinely comprehend what it is to be one may attain. With the sky and the stone. The illusion was finally broken by the logical side of my thinking. My granny wasn't like this. It wasn't real. I might have been dehydrated or suffering from altitude sickness, but I was having some sort of hallucination. Additionally, I was in grave danger. I struggled for the satellite device that served as my emergency beacon, carried on climbing alone at all times. My clumsy fingers seemed to be caused by the thin air. Was impairing my ability to coordinate, but I was still able to sound the distress signal. As soon as I hit the button, everything was different. The woman, who appeared to be my grandma, screamed in anger, as if she were the actual mountain. "You are unable to depart. You've been selected. You've been called by the mountain." The other climbers looked to observe me. Their expressions have changed from calm to famished and desperate. They started to accelerate, scurrying unnaturally fast over the pebbles to where I was. I quickly repelled it down my face. As I ventured, I was so desperate to get out that I forgot appropriate technique. The search and rescue were receiving the beacon's GPS coordinates. But based on its appearance, I was in some way 15 miles from my starting point for the ascent. I could hear the woman's voice behind me. Voice, yelling my name, no longer soft and recognizable. "David, you now belong to the mountain. You are unable to go away." The other climbers were moving impossibly as they followed me down, swiftly over terrain that ought to have needed cautious maneuvering. However, as I went down, they appeared to become less substantial, more akin to cloud-moving shadows. I was repulsed by what seemed 2 hours, going with my gut instead of a predetermined path, till at last I was on my feet, contacted a firm surface. I was at a place I had never seen before, at the foot of Grandfather Mountain. My vehicle was nowhere to be found, and the visitor amenities had vanished. The signal from the emergency beacon had reached a search, and I could hear helicopter rotors in the distance, as could the rescue team. 3 hours later, they discovered me, seated next to a 12 miles from where I had parked. I came to a road that didn't appear on their maps. The rescue. As if I had been moving between areas more quickly, the team reported that they had lost my beacon signal several times during the hunt, more than ought to have been feasible. I was unable to explain my path when they asked me to. The ridgeline I had adhered to, no map showed the other climbers or the impossible-to-reach mountain, or a shot taken from above. They discovered my automobile where I had left it in the parking lot, containing all of my backup equipment. Based on the timestamp displayed on I had gone missing for 7 hours when the emergency beacon was activated. However, I didn't recollection of my journey from the summit to the spot where they discovered me. Every test was conducted by the hospital's physicians they could come up with: toxin-detecting blood work, brain imaging for seizures or stroke symptoms, and psychological testing seeking indications of a detachment from reality. Everything returned to normal. In terms of physicality, I was all right. Their examinations showed that I was mentally stable and lucid. However, I am aware of my experiences on that mountain, and I am certain that they weren't hallucinations. After that day, I sold all of my equipment, canceled planned adventures, stopped climbing, and turned down invites to join climbing teams. My pals believe that I'm experiencing a midlife crisis of some sort. However, the reality is more straightforward and more horrifying. The sound of the mountain calling my name is still audible. Not just Grandfather Mountain, but everyone. I can see every peak on the horizon. Each and every I can see the top from the window of my apartment. In the calm evenings, they whisper my name, indicating that the everlasting ascent is still pending, that I still have a spot allocated among the shadow climbers. I've relocated to the city, but I'm aware that it will happen eventually. It's impossible to leave the Appalachian Mountains. And I'll hear that voice once more someday. Cozy, recognizable, alluring, and calling me home to a peak that transcends time and maps, where climbers rise indefinitely in pursuit of an unattainable goal. Arrived. The mountains are waiting. They are aware of my return.